UK, Canada and France threaten sanctions against Israel over what they say is wholly inadequate levels of humanitarian aid in Gaza.
U.S. President Donald Trump says ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine are to start immediately. The announcement came on Trump's own social media platform, Truth Social, following a 2-hour phone call with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Trump says the call went, quote, very well, adding that he believes Putin is really serious about ending the war. The U.S. president remained cautiously optimistic, adopting a more reserved approach in a White House briefing.
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved. But I think something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'd just back away and they're going to have to keep going. Again, this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation.
Meanwhile, Putin also commented on the conversation with his U.S. counterpart. The Russian leader praised Trump for his continued interest in mediating peace, adding that he assured him the Kremlin will work with Ukraine.
Договорились с президентом Соединенных Штатов о том, что Россия предложит и готова работать с украинской стороной над меморандумом по поводу возможного будущего мирного договора с определением ряда позиций, таких как, например, принципы урегулирования, сроки возможного заключения мирного соглашения и так далее, включая и возможное прекращение огня на определенное время в случае достижения соответствующих договоренностей.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who spoke with Trump privately before the Putin call, as well as after, along with other European leaders, expressed his country's desire for peace. The Ukrainian leader reiterated his readiness for a full and unconditional ceasefire, stressing that Russia must reflect its intent on peace through actions.
The leaders of Britain, Canada and France have threatened sanctions against Israel if it doesn't halt a renewed military offensive in Gaza and lift restrictions on humanitarian aid. The news follows the arrival of a limited amount of aid trucks in Gaza after nearly 3 months of an Israeli blockade on food, medicine and other essential supplies. The 3 Western nations issued a joint statement calling the aid deliveries wholly inadequate and warned of concrete actions against Israel if it continues its latest military operations in Gaza.
It's a really serious, unacceptable, intolerable situation, and that's why we are working intensely to coordinate with other leaders how we respond to this, because it is intolerable, it is unacceptable, and we will continue to work in that way.
In response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would defend itself by just means until achieving total victory. He reiterated Israel's conditions for peace, which include the release of all remaining hostages and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip.
The head of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Philippe Lazzarini, has called on U.S. President Donald Trump to use his leverage to change the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
I do believe that President Donald Trump has the necessary influence to change the situation in Gaza and to make sure that the siege be lifted and that the population get access to the assistance it deserves.
Lazzarini spoke to Euronews after Israel authorized the entry of basic amounts of aid on Monday following an 11-week blockade. Israel says it was pressured into the decision by its allies, namely the U.S., who couldn't bear the images of hunger coming out of the enclave. For Lazzarini, the limited aid coming into the Strip is not enough to prevent or reverse the widespread starvation in Gaza.
We have to define what the basic is, because what is needed in Gaza is a massive, unhindered, uninterrupted assistance and supply to make sure that we are reversing the trend of the spreading hunger in the Gaza Strip. nothing entered.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to seize the entirety of Gaza as part of an intensified offensive. Lazzarini described the plans as dystopian.
So what I see for the time being is a continuation of the destruction, of the deaths and killing of the Palestinians in Gaza. And my fear is that we might reach a point where Gaza might not be a land anymore for Palestinians to live in.
UNRWA has until now been the main provider of aid to Gaza, but has been banned from operating in the Palestinian territories under Israeli law.
Mr. Lazzarini, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Residents of Kyiv expressed little optimism about progress towards peace with Russia. Following talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations in Turkey last week, US President Donald Trump held separate phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Among ordinary Ukrainians, hope for a potential ceasefire and lasting peace remains dim.
Зараз це неможливо, коли вже в них не буде ресурсів, коли не буде в них армії. Тобто вони зараз готові воювати ще літом. Це вже ближче до осені можливо, а зараз ні. Він буде затягувати час і все.
Я думаю, що він просто тягне час. Хоче більше землі хапати. От і все. Він же сам сказав, що йому нужна іменно територія. От і все. А там він же ж нічого не оставляє. Вижжена земля. Розбомблено все.
Не вірю, поки такі, як зараз йдуть переговори, вже повинен був би Трамп, за скільки місяців вже при владі, давно зустрітись з Путіном, а він тільки по телефону розмовляє.
Ukraine has proposed a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire, which Moscow has effectively rejected by imposing far-reaching conditions. While Trump announced that Moscow and Kyiv would immediately begin ceasefire negotiations, he gave no indication of exactly when or where such talks might take place. Members of the World Health Organization approved a treaty to avoid the mistakes of the COVID-19 pandemic in future global health crises. It will require countries to take steps to prepare for and respond to future pandemics, with the goal of making medical supplies more accessible across the globe. But there are still a few issues that have yet to be resolved, and the treaty won't go into force until they have been agreed upon. One item still on the table is the creation of a new pathogen access and benefit sharing system, in which countries share samples and data with drug makers in return for access to vaccines and medicine. The United States is not expected to ratify the treaty under the Trump administration, which could undermine its effectiveness. US negotiators left the treaty discussions after US President Donald Trump began the process of withdrawing from the WHO when he took office in January.
A document seen by Euronews reveals Israel's proposal to create a new entity from scratch in Gaza after it says it's defeated Hamas. The 32-page document dates back to December 2023. It outlines a reconstruction plan as well as what the authors call a process of denazification in the education system, media and society. Two sources familiar with the document spoke to Euronews on condition of anonymity. They said the proposal was originally imagined for the West Bank rather than Gaza. The draft excludes Palestinian sovereignty, more specifically the presence of the Palestinian Authority. It also excludes the UN's humanitarian aid agency, UNRWA. The proposal heavily criticizes the European Union, which supports Palestinian sovereignty with the presence of UNRWA, and says that it should not take part in the reconstruction. It does mention the potential inclusion of a few European countries, such as Germany, Italy, France, and the UK, of which the latter two recently threatened with sanctions on Israel if it does not end its offensive and aid blockade. The Israeli plan is divided into 3 stages. In the first, the Israeli military would take full control of Gaza. They would establish buffer zones and possibly impose martial law. The military would manage civilian affairs until a new governing structure was in place. In the second phase, a new governance would be set up. Education would be tightly monitored, including extracurriculars with strong Israeli oversight, and would be conditional to the flow of aid. A third phase mentions potential Palestinian self-determination, although the plan does not offer any details on this.
A report published by a Senate inquiry commission revealed Swiss food industry giant Nestle had used prohibited filtering treatments on some of its brands, including Perrier. Such treatments are banned under French and European regulations to water labeled and advertised as natural mineral or spring water. The report concluded that high-level French officials were alerted by Nestle years ago about the violations and helped conceal the illegal practices deliberately. Last year, the Swiss company publicly acknowledged having used treatments on mineral waters and agreed to pay a €2 million fine to avoid legal action.
Flights at Paris Orly Airport are still being cancelled and delayed following a major breakdown of the air traffic control systems on Sunday. France's Civil Aviation Authority said the situation is improving in a statement. But airlines were asked to reduce flights by 15% on Monday, down from a 40% reduction on Sunday. The most affected flights were to destinations in Italy, Spain, Portugal and southern France.